Hello, greetings and welcome to another episode of Being Healthy the Shaolin Way. Today's topic will be aphasia, and I think you will find it interesting. Aphasia is a nasty word to the over 3 million people in the United States alone who are afflicted with it. Usually, aphasia is a byproduct of a stroke. According to the Mayo Clinic, aphasia is a condition that robs you of the ability to communicate. It can affect your ability to speak, write, and understand language, both verbal and written. Aphasia typically occurs suddenly after a stroke or a head injury, but it can also come on gradually from a slow growing brain tumor or disease that causes progressive, permanent damage, degenerative. The severity of aphasia depends on a number of conditions, including the cause and the extent of the brain damage. Once the cause has been addressed, the main treatment for aphasia is speech and language therapy. The person with aphasia relearns and practices language skills and learns to use other ways to communicate. Family members often participate in the process, helping the person communicate. Now that's a scary thought. Let's take a little quiz, shall we? That's put out by the National Aphasia Association to see how much you know about aphasia. 1. Most people are familiar with aphasia. Well, the answer to that question is false. Most people have never even heard of aphasia. The general public frequently misinterprets the difficulties of an individual with aphasia as experience and may react as though that person is psychologically ill or mentally retarded. Feelings of social isolation with resulting emotional effects are common to individuals with aphasia. Question 2. Aphasia means a person has difficulty retrieving words for speech and usually has some problems reading, writing, and understanding spoken language. The answer to that question is true. Aphasia is an acquired communication disorder that impairs an individual's ability to use language. The primary symptom is an inability to express oneself when speaking. However, in some cases, reading and writing or understanding of speech can be the more impaired language modality. 3. The cause of aphasia is usually due to a heart attack. And the answer to that question is false. The most frequent cause of aphasia is a stroke, but one can have a stroke without acquiring aphasia. It can also result from head injury, cerebral tumor, or other neurological causes. Consequently, the onset is usually sudden, although rare cases of progressive aphasia in adults and childhood developmental aphasia have been documented. 4. If people have aphasia, they will always have a significant memory loss as well. Now, the answer to that question is that it's false. Although a person with aphasia can have difficulty retrieving words and names, memory of situations, appointments, people, and general knowledge remains relatively intact. The ability to access ideas and thoughts via language is disrupted. 5. Aphasia is more prevalent than Parkinson's disease or muscular dystrophy. The answer to that question is unfortunately true. It has been estimated that 1 million Americans, or 1 in 250 people, have acquired aphasia. About two-thirds of these are the results of strokes, and one-third are head injuries. 6. A person with aphasia may have no noticeable physical impairment. Well, the answer to that question is true. But most people with aphasia also have right-sided weakness or paralysis of the leg and arm. This occurs because the left side of the brain is the side generally damaged when a person has aphasia, and it also controls movements on the right side of the body. All individuals, which is our seventh question, all individuals with aphasia have very similar symptoms of the same approximate severity. And that question is false. There are many types of aphasia. They are generally classified as either non-fluent or fluent. Specific symptoms can vary greatly. However, the commonly shared symptom is an impaired ability to use language. The severity of aphasia symptoms can range from very mild to very severe. When there is almost total impairment of all the language modalities, i.e., speaking, writing, reading, listening, the condition is referred to as global aphasia. Although most people with aphasia are older than 50 years of age, it is not unusual for younger people to acquire this disability. That is unfortunately true. A widespread misconception is that only older people suffer strokes. In fact, young adults as well as children can sustain strokes, but in such instances, it is usually secondary to a pre-existing medical condition. Now, the ninth question is interesting because, let me rephrase it this way. Some individuals with aphasia return to work. However, most are forced to retire or change jobs or work in a modified capacity. And the answer to that is unfortunately true. There are very few jobs that do not require speech and language skills. Individuals with mild or even moderate aphasia are sometimes able to return to work, but often with some changes in job responsibilities and a reduced workload. Recovery from aphasia is usually complete within 6 months of treatment. False. Approximately half of those who initially show symptoms of aphasia recover completely within the first few hours or days. This is known as transient aphasia. If the symptoms of aphasia persist beyond the first 2 to 3 months after stroke, a complete recovery is unlikely. Increased functioning is usually achieved through spontaneous recovery and speech therapy. Recovery is a slow process that usually requires a minimum of a year of treatment, including helping the individual and family understand and adjust to long-term deficits. Question number 4 was significant to me. People with aphasia don't have to have significant memory loss, but I did. I lost my memory big time. Why is that? Let's listen to what John Caswell of thestrokeconnection.com has to say about that to understand it better. And I hope that you can relate to my situation. As with so many things involving the human brain, memory is complicated. There's long-term memory and short-term. There's skill memory, language-based memory, and visual spatial memory. But the overarching issues of memory are storage and retrieval, and each can be affected by a stroke. It would be so convenient if there were a lobe in our brains for each of these, but there's not. Memory is diffuse. One brain component involved is the hippocampus, which is behind our ears in the region of the temporal lobe, deep within the center of the brain. Think of that as a file drawer through which memories enter the memory system, said clinical neuropsychologist Karen Postal, who teaches at Harvard Medical School and is president of the American Academy of Clinical Neuropsychology. As anyone who's used a file cabinet knows, putting things in is easy. Organizing them so they are easily retrievable is a different story. That job is accomplished by what is called the frontal executive network. It's not just the frontal lobe itself, but how that lobe connects with other parts of the brain, Postal said. For the purposes of understanding memory, think of this network as an executive secretary. A good executive secretary puts information into the file cabinet in an organized way. If this executive network is affected by a stroke, memories may be getting in through the hippocampus, but they are haphazardly organized. Like kids just stuffing things in files, the work of the executive system is so critical because if the information is organized going into that file cabinet, then it is going to be a lot easier to retrieve that information. Memories are stored in multiple places in the brain. Alex Stromerex, a neurologist and rehabilitational physician at MedStar National Rehabilitation Network, said, "One of the ways we think memories are stored is by strengthening and weakening the connection between neurons. The term for that is long-term potentiation, or LTP. LTP is a modulation of the connections in the brain and an upregulation or a downregulation. If that sounds complicated, well, it is, but that is only the start. Multiply that by tens of billions of neurons, each one of which has tens of thousands of connections with other cells. Where do you begin to pull that apart and understand how it works? As with so many things involving the human brain, memory is complicated. There's long-term memory and short-term. There's skill memory, language-based memory, and visual-spatial memory. But the overarching issues of memory are storage and retrieval, and each can be affected by stroke. Now, this explains what happened to me. Not only did I have aphasia, I had significant memory loss. So I was lost in a fog of confusion and disorientation, and I couldn't talk. The American Stroke Association has three broad categories of stroke-associated aphasia. They are, and it's best to go through this slowly to understand what they are. Wernicke's aphasia. If you have Wernicke's aphasia, you may say many words that don't make sense. Use the wrong words. For instance, you might call a fork a gleeble. String together a series of meaningless words that sound like a sentence but don't make any sense. Now, some people have or are afflicted with Broca's aphasia. Injury to the frontal regions of the left hemisphere impacts how words are strung together to form complete sentences. This can lead to Broca's aphasia, which is characterized by difficulty forming complete sentences, leaving out words like is or the, saying something that doesn't resemble a sentence, trouble understanding sentences, making mistakes in following directions like left, right, under, and after, using a word that's close to what you intend, but not the exact word. For example, saying car when you mean truck would be an example of Broca's aphasia. Now, the third category is global aphasia, a stroke that affects an extensive portion of your front and back regions of the left hemisphere may result in global aphasia. You may have difficulty understanding words and sentences, forming words and sentences, and the like. I had global aphasia. Forming words were impossible for me early on, although I have recovered somewhat. I can understand words and sentences. I just for the longest time couldn't say them. But now, as I say, I've recovered enough to speak, using very few words at first and developing a broader vocabulary as I went along. My memories, well, I had damn few to begin with, and by my wife showing me pictures of my family life, I have slowly been recovering them. It has been a painful process, not speaking and not remembering. I'd like to share a little bit of what that has been like with you. First, I'll start with aphasia, what it's like to not be able to speak, to be trapped inside of your own mind, and then slowly, ever so slowly, be one of the lucky few that recovers his speech and memories. Then I'll move on to my memory loss, what it's like not to know who you are, and to gradually, ever so gradually, recover your memories with big black holes where memory used to be. But enough of that. Till our next episode, you may visit us at healthyshaolin.com. And if you want to learn more about the monks of the Shaolin Temple, you can go to shaolintempleus.org. And if failing that, you can listen to our podcast. So until then, I wish you peace and blessings, and namaste.